Hey people, welcome to the Run Testers, and in this video we're going to be comparing two hugely popular shoes. We've got the ASICS Novablast 3 and the Puma Velocity Nitro 2. Now both shoes were upgraded for 2022, and in this video we're going to be telling you, have those upgrades worked? Is one shoe better than the other for a different type of running? Where should you spend your money? Watch on to find out. So some quick key details then. When it comes to drop, the Novablast 3 has an 8mm drop, the Velocity Nitro 2 slightly higher drop at 10mm. The stack heights, you get 31mm in the heel on the Novablast 3, 23mm in the forefoot. Velocity Nitro 2 comes in with 33.5mm in the heel and 23.5mm in the forefoot. Weight-wise, the Novablast 3 is 8.9 ounces or 253 grams in a UK men's size 8.5. The Velocity Nitro comes in a tad heavier at 9.5 ounces or 270 grams. Price-wise, the Novablast 3 is going to cost you £135 or $140. The Velocity Nitro 2 is quite significantly cheaper at £100 or $120. So into some quick design details then. Well, the Novablast 3 has a new midsole foam for this third generation. It's now using Flight Foam Blast Plus cushioning, and you've got a slightly higher midsole stack than the Generation 2. But in addition to making for a bouncier ride, this kind of new lighter foam still means that this shoe manages to have all that more foam, but it's still 30 grams lighter than the previous generation. Up top, you've got pretty dense mesh uppers that sort of hold the foot nicely. You've got a big padded plush kind of heel collar. You've got a very thin gusseted tongue that kind of wraps the foot. There's overlays on the heel to bring added kind of hold and stability to the heel area. And flip them over and you've got a reasonable covering of AHA rubber grip outsole. Over to the Velocity Nitro 2, and what you've got here is a sort of slightly more traditional looking kind of silhouette of a running shoe, and you're getting two layers of foam in the midsole. You're getting the Nitro nitrogen infused foam and a layer of EVA. Now what's happening here is you've got a little bit of EVA to add a bit of stability to what is the squishier, bouncier, softer Nitro foam. Again, up top you've got pretty dense mesh uppers, you've got really kind of thick padded laces. This second generation is slightly lighter than the first generation Velocity, and you've still got that excellent covering of Puma grip on the outsole. Now I just want to do a very quick kind of side-by-side of these two shoes. First thing you really notice, I keep saying this about the Novablast, is just how long the Novablast is by comparison to other shoes. And even kind of when you sort of flip it up, how much kind of wider the footprint is actually in terms of the Novablast kind of landing sort of kind of zones. Even in the midfoot and in the heel, they tend to be kind of wider in the midsection here and into the back of the heel. Now generally speaking, I think the Velocity 2s have what is really just a much more kind of traditional running shoe kind of shape and silhouette and design than the Novablast 3. The Novablast 3 with this kind of, it's quite kind of high sort of hulking great kind of midsole foam. The foot sort of drops into that and it kind of comes up high on that kind of stack, and it sort of cradles a bit. This is just a bit more kind of traditional in terms of the way the foot sits on that kind of midsole bed as well. They've both got pretty nice kind of padded tongues that kind of wrap the foot there. They're sort of slightly padded but thin enough. You know, you're not getting these hulking great kind of big padded tongues, but they do take the edge off kind of lace pinch, all of that kind of stuff. I guess one difference is the Puma Velocity Nitro almost is like a half booty. The sort of gusseted tongue sort of starts sort of halfway down and then it kind of wraps the whole foot all the way down, whereas the Novablast, you've just got the kind of those gusseted sort of sides stitched in, and then it kind of stops. In terms of the heel collars, I think you're going to get, you know, actually there's not a lot to choose between the padding that goes all the way around the heel collar in both of these. They're pretty much similar, both made for quite a kind of plush, kind of nice sort of soft, comfortable hold on the heel. If you flip them up onto the outsole, and this is where there's quite a marked difference actually, the Novablast 3 go for a bit more kind of strategic outsole rubber that's placed in kind of high impact, kind of, you know, places where you're going to land and need a bit of grip, I guess, and leaving kind of some bits exposed, whereas Puma, it's not messing around. It's gone kind of full grip right across the kind of the sort of fore of midfoot here, and there's ample kind of rubber in those sort of heel reinforced areas as well, so a little bit of difference there. On to fit then. For me, I ran in a UK 8.5 in both these, which is my size, and I found that both of them actually come up long in the toe box, and there is potentially an argument to go half a size down in both of these shoes. I found it a little bit more pronounced in the Novablast 3, and that's one that I would sort of definitely recommend going down. In the Puma Velocity Nitro 2, I felt like eventually I could sort of get away with it, and I felt like the way that it wrapped the rest of my foot and held the rest of my foot, it might be a bit of a risk. I've got quite wide feet if I went down half a size, so I think you've got to sort of judge that one a little bit. There's not as much in the toe as you get in the Novablast 3.
So I found that the Puma Velocity Nitro 2 fit me really well, true to size. It's got a really good hold around the heel. There's probably a little bit too much padding there in terms of the amount of sweat and rain it could absorb during runs sometimes, but yeah, the fit was really good for me, true to size. The Novablast 3 does run slightly long for me. It's not been a huge problem, I have to say. During my testing I was pretty happy in my normal size, but I have got slightly too much room in the toe box, and I would probably go for a half size down to get a better fit in the shoe. So the Velocity Nitro 2 is one of my favourite running shoes, and pretty much every time I use it I tend to like it more and more. It's got a really comfortable, unfussy ride to it where it just feels, you know, cushioned and comfortable, like I say, for easy plods, but then if you do start to up the pace, it livens up and I feel like you get a bit more bounce, and it ends up being a really versatile shoe as a result. You know, it's not all out quick, but I've happily done quite hard sessions in the shoe, and it feels quite light and nimble on the foot. It's also got a really fantastic outsole. That means you can take it off-road very comfortably, and that only increases its versatility. I think the kind of classic run that I always think of with the Puma Velocity Nitro 2 is the run I do quite often. If I'm doing an hour easy to steady progression run, I'll often start doing maybe 20-30 minutes in my local forest at an easy pace where the grip of the shoe is fantastic, it's very comfortable, feels very cruisy, and then I'll hit a road near the forest to do the steadier stuff, increase the pace, and the ride of the Velocity Nitro comes to life a bit more, you get a bit more bounce, and it's just really comfortable at a nice range of paces on a range of terrains. Now the ASICS Novablast 3 is probably the more hyped shoe of the two for sure, and my first couple of runs I really liked it. I thought the ride was very enjoyably bouncy, but in a controlled way. It wasn't sloppy like I think maybe the first edition of the shoe was a little bit for me. It felt reasonably stable, but yeah, like I say, bouncy, lively. It's a bit lighter than the Velocity Nitro 2, and I thought it was going to be, you know, a more versatile shoe, but actually since then I've gone on to like the Novablast 3 a little bit less when I've run in it. For one, I think the ride has dulled a little bit after that for those first couple of runs. I don't think it's quite as bouncy as before. It's still, you know, pretty bouncy and lively, but yeah, it's not quite as exciting as it was straight out of the box, and that's only after about kind of 50-60k that the ride's lost a bit of that edge for me. And I also don't think it's quite as versatile as I expected. Like, taking it out for a couple of faster runs lately, and the shoe does feel a bit big and heavy at times on the foot, even though it's lighter than the Velocity Nitro 2. I think the Velocity Nitro 2 runs lighter than the Novablast 3 for me. You know, it can do those runs, those kind of easy to steady runs as well, but I think the Novablast 3 is more comfortable as a kind of easy shoe, you know, a daily trainer that focuses much more on the easy runs. Like, it's pretty versatile, just not as versatile as I was expected, and that disappointed me a little bit. But one thing that has improved as time has gone on with the Novablast 3 is the grip on the outsole, which was very slick and a bit worrying at first on kind of slightly wet pavements and that kind of thing, but I think the outsole has roughed up a bit. And for example, today I took it on a run on kind of wet tarmac with some steep downhill sections and didn't have any concerns about grip. So I think that's improved a lot. It's still not quite as durable and as grippy as the Velocity Nitro 2 outsole, but those concerns have been allayed a little bit by my, you know, extended testing of the Novablast 3.
Onto the run test then, and I've done many miles in both of these shoes. I've done my usual, which is a mixture of roads, pavements, and some compacted kind of river paths, off-road stuff, just to see how they fare on that ground as well. I also did a mile test where I ran with both of these shoes, one on each foot, just to see how the ride compared. And here's how I found them. So I've just completed my usual kind of 1 mile test where I come out and I wear one shoe on one foot and the other one on the other foot. So I've got the Novablast 3 on the left and the Puma Velocity Nitro 2 on the right. And, you know, the obvious difference here is you can definitely feel the high stack of foam on the Novablast versus the Puma Velocity Nitro, which sit much closer to the ground. The Novablast 3 are also much softer. They are definitely a little bit more sinky. The Velocity Nitro 2, from that mile that I've just done, you know, you're aware of the kind of firmness underfoot, although these are still quite a soft shoe, I think, but they are an awful lot kind of firmer than the Novablast 3. Now, whether or not you can actually get much return and spring out of the Novablast 3, I think it's a question that kind of evades me a little bit. I'm not sure I get that kind of bounce and return. I know some people do, and I think I kind of prefer the Velocity Nitro 2. It's soft enough to soak up the miles, but it doesn't feel sinky. I don't feel like I'm working hard to lift my foot out, which I sometimes do with the Novablast 3. So on that, I think actually, you know, Velocity Nitro 2 here, again, it's slightly sort of less shoe, it's slightly more nimble, slightly more agile, slightly more traditional feeling. They're both quite long in the toe box. They both run fairly long, and there's an argument I think in both of you might want to go half a size down. The Novablast 3 and my normal size feel much longer than the Velocity Nitro 2, but the Nitro 2 does have a little bit extra there. The uppers, I mean, I love the Velocity Nitro 2, the way they kind of wrap the foot. There's not a huge amount of difference, I don't think, in the kind of overall roominess and that kind of foot hugging that you get from the uppers. the comfort into the heel, all of that feels pretty similar, not much to choose between the two. Weight wise, I feel like the Velocity Nitro 2 feels like a lighter shoe on the foot from that mile comparison than the Novablast 3. So yeah, just a slightly sort of lighter, again, more nimble, more agile run than you might get from the Novablast 3.
So I do actually think these are both really pretty good shoes, but I would personally opt for the Velocity Nitro 2 out of them. I think it's better value. Obviously, it's on RRP and it's often in sales as well. I think it's got a better outsole, which will improve durability and makes it more versatile on the terrain you can tackle. And I actually prefer the ride of it. It is just a very, like I say, an unfussy shoe. I think it just works really well for a range of uses. I just really like how it feels underfoot at easy and faster paces. Like, neither of these shoes are all out quick. I thought the Novablast 3 would actually end up being a more versatile shoe than the Velocity Nitro and would be a very versatile daily trainer, but I haven't actually found that to be the case in my testing. I think it is better as an easy day shoe. It's fine for steadier paces, but I prefer the way the Velocity Nitro 2 feels at those paces. So of these two, I think it's a little bit more unheralded, but I do prefer the Velocity Nitro 2, and that would be the shoe I'd be getting as my daily trainer or as my cushion shoe. Novablast 3 is a really good shoe. Loads of people love it, I know that. But I found that personally, I enjoy the Velocity Nitro 2 more for everything really, where it's easy running, hard running, the way the shoe looks, the way it feels on the foot, and the price. So yeah, that would be the one I'd opt for out of these two.
Well, my verdict then, I think if you're looking for a capable, easy run shoe, then both of these fit that bill. When it comes down to kind of getting up to those sort of medium paces and beyond, I feel like the Velocity Nitro 2 does a much better job than the ASICS Novablast 3. I just feel, for me, like the ASICS Novablast 3 feels like too much shoe on the foot. I don't quite like the sort of sinking feeling that you get. I feel like I have to work a little bit harder to sort of get out of each step. I much prefer the kind of slightly more, it's still soft, but still more slightly direct and sort of traditional run feel of the Puma Velocity Nitro 2. I much prefer the overall way the Puma Velocity Nitro feel on the foot, and despite these apparently being a heavier shoe, I actually feel like they're sort of slightly more nimble and agile than the Novablast 3, just to this fact this is a big sort of hulking great shoe, and I feel like that kind of, for me anyway, it sort of interrupts my running a little. So yeah, I feel like the Velocity Nitro 2, I think it has a better range, it's better at sort of higher paces. I find it perfectly kind of ample cushioning in terms of kind of going at those easy paces too. I just find the run, kind of the ride, much more natural than Novablast 3. They're also sort of significantly cheaper, and I think just a really, really good, durable shoe. This is one that should be in your rotation no matter what. I think the Novablast 3, it just doesn't fit for me. It's not one that I would sort of reach for sort of readily over and above many other shoes. So there you have it. That has been our head-to-head of the Puma Velocity Nitro 2 and the ASICS Novablast 3. Any questions, as ever, hit us up in the comments below. Tell us if you think we've got it wrong. We're always open to that kind of feedback. If you want to see more reviews coming up on the channel soon, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that bell so you'll get notified for when they're coming. It's been a pleasure to talk to you as ever, and we hope to see you again soon on the Run Testers.